Welcome back to another video, and today we got our Week 7 college football top 25 rankings. So we're going to do this how we always do it, where we look at all 25 of my rankings, not based off the AP poll, not based off of any other rankings or any other site, my personal opinion. So we'll recap the game played last week and then dive into our prediction for this week. If you're new around here, make sure you subscribe, turn on the notice to make sure you don't miss whenever we post. Not only do we do college football rankings every single week. We do NFL weekly picks, MLB videos as well, and then when NBA and college basketball start up, we have those weekly as well. So make sure you subscribe. It's the time to be on the channel. You're not going to want to miss. Real quick, links in the description. As always, X, Twitch, TikTok, Discord. Make sure you follow those. Join those. With all that being said, though, let's get in to our number 25 team. It's going to be USC. Now, I didn't want to go as far as the eight people in terms of, dropping them out completely of the rankings. So I still have them at 25. I think they still deserve to be ranked. I mean, you still got that week 1 win against LSU, really just carrying their resume. But a road loss against Michigan, where, honestly, if we're being honest, they probably should have won. But this week, going out on the road against Minnesota, their second Big Ten loss, mind you, of this season already. They go out and lose 24-17. Really a ugly game. USC's offense has been somewhat disappointing. I mean, really, it hasn't looked as good as we once thought. Now, the defense, I will say, has looked better than I thought, but, definitely disappointing so far from the offense. Miller Moss maybe isn't as good as we once thought. Now, he's definitely not bad. I mean, he threw for 200 yards, but two picks. I don't know. Whitty Marks had a nice day. They had a really good game rushing the ball. Ran for 173 yards, but ultimately it wasn't enough. Darius Taylor for Minnesota had 144 rushing yards himself. They almost cracked 200 rushing yards on the day. USC falls, their second loss of the season already, and now this week they got Penn State coming to town. Now, honestly, I do think there's a chance they win this game. I feel like people aren't giving them enough credit. They probably should have beat Michigan on the road. They also beat LSU. Yes, that was a trap game against Minnesota, but I think there's a chance they come out here and win this one. I wouldn't be surprised. I really wouldn't. I mean, Penn State maybe getting a little excited, getting a little antsy that now they're all the way up to number 4 in the AP poll. Now, where are they in my rankings? We'll get to that. But I could honestly see USC winning this game. I think if it's a low-scoring game, it definitely benefits Penn State more just because that defense for Penn State is just ridiculously good. But USC has a solid defense as well. I think USC struggles to score in this one. Like I said, the offense has been a little bit disappointing. I think we could see that come back to bite them here in this game, maybe when it matters most. I think it's going to be a close game all the way through, but I do think Penn State wins this one. The fact that it's in USC's stadium definitely plays a factor, but I mean that's really the only. If this was in Happy Valley, I'd take Penn State pretty easily, but the fact that USC gets it at home definitely makes you think a little bit more. But I do think Penn State wins now. Kind of the reason I kept USC, similar to what I did with Texas A&M, is I kept Texas A&M at number 24. I wanted to drop them out, but I figured, well, if they lose to Missouri, I'll drop them out. If they win, obviously they'll move up. So there's no point in me moving USC out yet. Now, obviously, if they lose again to Penn State, then they will have to fall out. But as of right now, I'll keep them in. Number 24, I got Nebraska. Nebraska's a team that the AP poll still doesn't have ranked. I've had them ranked every single week of the season. I know they lost to Penn State at home. Sorry, against Illinois at home. In overtime. That was a great game. Dylan Raiola is looking solid so far. Nothing crazy, nothing too special. I mean, he's shown some flashes, but obviously he's a true freshman. He'll continue to develop. But Nebraska gets a ugly defensive win against Rutgers, 14-7. Now, remind you, Rutgers actually entered this game undefeated, but Nebraska held them to under 200 yards passing, under 100 yards rushing. Now, they were held to the same thing, and Dylan Raiola didn't throw for a touchdown and had 2 picks, and had 1 pick, but Rutgers quarterback did throw for 2 picks. Like I said, defensive, ugly game here. Nebraska does coming on top in this one, and they moved to 5-1 on the season. When looking at the rest of their schedule, they still got a lot of tough games. At Indiana is their next game. Now they're on bye this week, but Indiana's 6-0, and then obviously after that they got to go to Columbus, take on the Buckeyes. That's definitely not an easy game. They also have at USC. Wisconsin's never an easy game, and at Iowa. So Nebraska still has plenty of tough games on the schedule. We'll see where they finish this season, but as of right now, I do still have them ranked inside the top 25. When looking at our next team, it's going to be Michigan at number 23, moving down 13 spots. We've already had two double-digit fallers, and we will have one more here coming up in just a second. But when looking at Michigan, I mean, you go into Washington, you have your third quarterback of the season playing. They bench Alex Orji. That's definitely a problem when you have three quarterbacks starting in 6 different games. I mean, it's unfortunate if you're a Michigan fan. I mean, Jack Tuttle, nothing. He didn't really show much. I mean, 98 total yards, a touchdown, and a pick. But Washington gets their revenge, so good on them. I mean, Washington's not a team that anyone was really excited about this year. I feel like a lot of people figured they would take a whole lot of steps back. But Michigan, second loss of the season. And when looking at the rest of their schedule, at Illinois is a game we previously thought they would win. Now, I don't know. Illinois is ranked. I have Illinois ranked higher than Michigan. And it is their next game. I mean, now they have a bye this week, but when looking at the rest of the schedule, home against Oregon, I don't think they win that game. At Indiana, I don't even know if they win that game. Indiana's 6-0. Their offense looks legit. Can Michigan keep up with that? I really don't know. And obviously at Ohio State, we were looking at Michigan thinking, okay, 10-2, possibly ceiling. I mean, I saw some people saying 10-2, saying they would beat one of Texas, Oregon, and Ohio State, and then win the rest of their games. But now, sitting through 6 weeks, they're at 4-2. I mean, and like I said, Illinois and Indiana now have become tough road games for them. There's a real chance if they lose those 4 games left on their schedule, the 4 tough ones against the ranked teams, they could finish 6-6. Now, do I think that'll happen? No. But I mean, even if they lose 3 or even 2 of those last games, I mean, 7-5, 8-4. Does that sound good coming off a national championship performance? I mean, no playoffs. I mean, not even close to the playoffs. That would be a disappointing season in my opinion. But I mean, it's definitely in the cards. So we'll have to keep an eye on Michigan. And obviously with that quarterback situation, very interesting stuff. It's good they're on bye this week because if they had to go on the road to play Illinois this week, I don't know if there's any chance they would win. They get a week to regroup, though, so we'll see how they fared next week. Speaking of Illinois, I have them at number 22. They are coming off of a bye after the loss at Penn State. I think it's good. They regroup, just kind of, focus back in after the unfortunate loss. But I will say Luke Altmaier at quarterback has looked very good so far through the season. When looking at this Purdue game, they get it at home. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I think Illinois' defense comes through for them. I think they win 28-13 over Purdue. Purdue's not looking great. I'm pretty sure they only have 1 win this season. So, yeah, not a great start for Purdue. I think Illinois will have no problems here in winning this one. Number 21, our third double-digit faller in the first 5 teams we've talked about. Missouri dropping down 12 spots after a absolute blowout against Texas A&M on the road, 41-10. Now, Texas A&M was favored. I will say they weren't favored by 31 points. They were favored by 2.5. I thought Missouri would win because I thought Missouri was better. I guess the home field advantage for them was just that good. I mean, Missouri could not do anything offensively, and they really just as a team, they couldn't do anything defensively. They couldn't stop A&M. They were down 24-0 at half. It's not like, A&M pulled away or anything. I mean, there was a point it was 34-0 in this game. A&M just didn't even have to do anything, really in the second half. I mean, you thought 24-0 going into the half, you're like, okay, you got to get something going. It's not over, but you got to get something going. Right out the gate, Texas A&M, 75-yard run off the. Was it off the kick? I don't think it was off the kickoff return, but 75-yard run for Le'Veon Moss. He had 3 touchdowns on the day. Um, I mean, Connor Weigman's back after the injury. He looked great in doing so. 276 yards, no touchdowns, no picks, but that's really all they needed him to do. They ran for 236 yards on the ground. Brady Cook only 186 yards passing, and a passing touchdown with no interceptions. Yeah, I mean, Missouri just got absolutely dominated. This week, I do think they win against UMass. I think they have a little bit of a revenge game. Not a revenge game, but like a get-right game. I think they win 45-0 here. But yeah, that was embarrassing. Missouri falls way down in our rankings. Number 20, though, I got Oklahoma moving down one spot. Not necessarily because they did anything. I mean, they were coming off the bye, so they didn't even play. But this week, they got Red River against Texas. Neutral site game. I think it's going to be a closer game than some would think, just because of the rivalry. I mean, Oklahoma's defense has looked very good so far. I mean, the most points they've given up is 25 to Tennessee, who was a top 4 team, but we'll get to where they're at now. Um, they beat Auburn, coming off that win. They take care of business. Now they got Texas. Do I think they win? I mean, it's hard to go against a 14-point favorite. I do think Texas wins, but I think Oklahoma covers the spread. I think it's a close game through 3.5 quarters. Maybe Texas gets a turnover or something. Jackson Arnold hasn't looked great through the first 5 games of the season. I think Texas wins. I think they're overall the better team. Is Quinn Ewers going to play? I think that's actually a very good question. I believe he is. But if Archie Manning plays, could we see Oklahoma get it done for the second year in a row? Maybe. I mean, that was Texas's only regular season loss last year was to Oklahoma. So that could definitely be interesting. I do believe Quinn Ewers is going to play, though. And I do think Texas wins. Even with Archie Manning, they definitely could still win. I mean, they're a pretty highly ranked team. I don't want to spoil anything, but moving on to Indiana, number 19. I ranked them for the first time this season. I haven't had them ranked. I've just kind of been waiting to see how they would fare in Big Ten play. And through the first 2 games, 42-28 over Maryland, and then on the road against Northwestern, winning 41-24. Really good sign if you're an Indiana fan. I mean, the new coach, this offense is just legit. I mean, 31-77, 42-52, 42-41. I mean, that is all you can ask for if you're an Indiana fan. I mean, it's been a great start this season. 6-0. You're already, secured a bowl game. Curtis Rourke, I believe, is the quarterback. He's been amazing to start the year. Really, I mean, everyone on this offense has been playing. Now, the defense does look a little bit concerning. The defense doesn't look great, but the offense looks legit. They look explosive. And I think they could give Nebraska some problems here in 2 weeks. Now, this week they don't play them. They're on bye. But this game is going to be a very interesting one to watch. Indiana versus Nebraska. We'll see how both these teams fare in that one next week. Moving on, though, to Iowa State. Moving up to number 18. The AP poll has them all the way up at 11. I disagree with that. I don't see why they're that high. I mean, I think all the teams I've ranked ahead of them are better, and you look at this resume, their best win is on the road against Iowa by 1 point. I mean, your best win is against Iowa on the road. I mean, you could say that for Ohio. I mean, Ohio State's best win is against Iowa too, but it's different. I mean, it's Ohio State compared to Iowa State. They haven't necessarily. I mean, they've won every other game by at least 18. So I guess you could say they could. I don't know. I'm just a little bit hesitant on the Iowa State hype. I will say, though, pretty impressive start. I don't think anyone expected them to go 5-0 to start the year. Rocco Becht has been great. But when looking at this game on the road against West Virginia was a team I predicted to have, I believe, 8 or 9 wins this season. When looking at this West Virginia team, they have won. I mean, they lost to Penn State week 1. They lost to Pitt on the road in the backyard brawl. But the past 2 weeks, they take down Kansas and Oklahoma State, two teams I had ranked inside the top 25 in the preseason. Now they get Iowa State coming to town. It's a night game. This might be surprising. I think West Virginia wins. I think they're bound to get one of these upset wins at home. They have one of the best environments in the sport. I think West Virginia gets it done. I don't know. Maybe I'm an Iowa State hater. I'm just not buying in right now to all the hype. I don't know. I don't really get why they're at 11 right now. Now, if they win this game, maybe they can move up a little bit more. But as of right now, I'm being a little bit conservative on this ranking. I do think they lose, though, this week against West Virginia. I mean, there's always upsets. I got to start predicting some, so I'm going to take I'm going to take West Virginia. Moving on to number 17, Boise State continuing to move up the rankings all the way up here 4 spots. Ashton Jeanty has got to be the Heisman favorite at this point. I mean, he ran for 186 yards, 3 touchdowns in the first half of the Utah State game. He is through 5 games of the season. I just want to make sure I get these stats right. Hold on. Let me pull this up. Through 5 games this season at 1,031 yards, 10.9 yards a carry, 16 touchdowns. He's averaging over 200 yards and over 3 touchdowns a game and averaging 11 yards a carry, 10.9 to be exact, but 11 yards a carry. I mean, this is historic. You look at the past, I saw the stat, the past 3 running back winners, it was like Derrick Henry and then 2 other guys, I forget who. But he has by far better stats than the 3 running backs that have last won the Heisman. I mean, he's ridiculous. He's got to be the Heisman favorite at this point. Boise State, if they get into the 12-team playoff, which it's looking like they will, I mean, the schedule isn't. I mean, it's easy. I mean, at UNLV is really the only somewhat tough game. I mean, they almost beat Oregon on the road. I mean, think about this. They almost beat Oregon on the road. I'm going to say that again. So, Boise State is legit. They get in as the 12 seed. They're not going to be an easy, bye week, some people are saying, for the 5 seed. They're actually a really good team. Ashton Jeanty, he's my pick for the Heisman as of right now. I mean, we're still early in the season. Can he keep this up? But he's shown no signs of slowing down so far. I think we see another big game here. I think they score a little bit less than typical. Just because it's in Hawaii on the road could be a little weird. I do think they win, though, here. Number 16, I have Kansas State. I'm going to continue to believe in Kansas State. Yes, they have the loss on the road against BYU. They come off the bye this week. We'll really get to see how good they play against Colorado here on the road. I think this is going to be a really good test for both teams. Kansas State, surprisingly, only favored by 4.5. I mean, Colorado's been very good, 4-1 on the year. But with Kansas State, I feel like they're better overall than Colorado. I think Colorado can actually keep it pretty close. It's a night game at home for them. The stadium's going to be packed. I mean, Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders, they got the playmakers, Jimmy Horn. But I do think Kansas State is overall the better team. I'm going to continue to believe in Kansas State. I still do believe they are the best team overall in the Big 12. But as of right now, I got to keep them a little bit lower just based off the resume. But they can definitely get back. I mean, Arizona was ranked when they played them. They blew them out. Oklahoma State was ranked when they played them. They blew them out. BYU's now going to be a top 15 team here in my rankings. A little bit of a spoiler. I think they win, though, on the road against Colorado. I think it's a very close game, though. Speaking of BYU, number 15, like I said, top 15 in the country. I don't think anybody expected this. BYU's actually at 14 in the AP poll. Surprising they have them higher than me because I'm usually big on, I guess underrated sleeper teams. I kind of rank them higher typically than the AP poll, but guess not in this sense. But BYU coming off of a bye last week, so no game to really talk about there. They get a home game against Arizona. Arizona was looking like they were going to come back. I mean, they beat Utah on the road, but then they go out and lose to Texas Tech. Now, when looking at Texas Tech is a team that I almost ranked. I didn't rank them yet, but they're 5-1. Their only loss is to Washington State on the road, but they have a win over Arizona State, who was undefeated when they played them, and now a road win over Arizona. Texas Tech is an interesting team. They were one of my sleeper teams in the Big 12 in the preseason. When looking at BYU, when looking in this game though, I think BYU getting it at home is the factor. I think whoever's at home in this game, I'd probably take. Um, I'm gonna go with BYU. I could definitely see Arizona coming out, offense firing on all cylinders and just running up the score, and just BYU not being able to keep up. But we saw them blow out Kansas State 38-9. I mean, BYU. Besides, I mean, they won against SMU on the road, who is ranked in the AP poll now. So that's 2 ranked wins. Um, BYU's looking really good. I mean, besides the SMU game, they've put up over 34 points in every single game. So can their offense keep up if it does get into a shootout? I think it probably could. But I don't think it gets into a shootout. I think BYU slows them down a little. I think they win 27-23, but definitely could go either way. Like I said, probably pick the home team. If Arizona was at home, I'd probably take them. LSU at number 14. LSU is a team that I am very confused on what to think. I think we're going to find out a whole lot from both of these teams on how good they are this week. Ole Miss traveling to LSU. 3-point favorites here. LSU coming off of a bye, so they've had a lot of time to prepare for this one. Who wins? I'm back and forth on this one. Very much. I think, speaking of shootouts, I think this game is going to be a shootout. I think both these teams go out, put up a whole lot of points. I think it's going to be one of the games of the year, potentially. Both these teams have kind of looked disappointing to start the year, if we're being honest with ourselves. Again, I think we're going to learn a lot about both of these teams. I do think overall Ole Miss is the slightly better team. Actually, I don't want to say slightly. I think Ole Miss is clearly. I don't want to say clearly. I think Ole Miss is the better team here. I think there's a bit of a difference, if that's what you want to call it. But LSU does get it at home, which is, I mean, it is a night game. It's going to be tough for Ole Miss. It's going to be tough for both these teams to win this game. I think Ole Miss is slightly better though, so I'm going to take them. I think their roster overall is better here. So give me Ole Miss in a very high scoring game. Number 13, I have Utah moving up 2 spots, coming off the bye. Didn't necessarily do anything to deserve it. Just kind of, figured. Just kind of moved up based off teams ahead of them moving down. But in this game at Arizona State, I feel like people are kind of just penciling this in as a Utah win. Utah hasn't looked good, may I remind you. Oklahoma State, that win doesn't look as good now. They only won by 3. Oklahoma State is just lost again this week to, who was it? I think it was West Virginia. They got blown out too. Utah is a 6.5-point favorite. It's a road game at night. I could see Arizona State. This could be one of the upsets of this week. I am going to take Utah, but I think it's a very close game, and I think Arizona State just misses out on the upset. But I could definitely see it. I do think Utah wins, though, overall. I think Kyle Whittingham gets them the win. I think he's good enough to win them this game. Number 12, Texas A&M. Moving up 12 spots, the biggest climber this week by far. I mean, well deserving. At least, I mean, they're first in the SEC right now. I don't think anybody expected that. They're 5-1 on the year. They got a bye this week, but last week they go out, absolutely, just dominate Missouri, 41-10. Connor Weigman comes back and looks amazing, coming off the injury. I mean, it's pretty impressive what we've seen them do. I mean, the Notre Dame loss week 1 was disappointing. But now, um, Notre Dame. Uh, Notre Dame's looking better. I mean, they did lose to Northern Illinois, but they are high up in my rankings, so that loss doesn't look as bad as I guess it did a couple weeks ago. And now they have a blowout win against a top 10 Missouri team at the time. They're going to have a lot. I mean, when looking at this A&M schedule, if they go out and beat LSU at home, there could be a chance A&M gets in the playoffs. If they beat LSU, the only other game I could see them losing is Texas. That could put them at 10-2 on the season, with a win over Missouri, with a win over LSU, 10-2 in the SEC. Only one loss in the SEC as well. Could be interesting. A&M now has brought themselves back and actually realistically in the playoff race at this point. Now they got to bye this week, so no game prediction here. But A&M just gave their season some new life with that Missouri win. I mean they were favored, but I don't think anybody expected them to go out there and win in this fashion. So they climb up dramatically. Number 11 Ole Miss, 5-1 on the year. They get a much-needed road win against South Carolina after the very disappointing loss against Kentucky. They win 27-3. The defense, I will say, Ole Miss's defense actually looks better than I thought it would. Now, the offense has been a little bit slow starting off in SEC play. I think against LSU on the road, both these teams go out scoring. I've already said I do think Ole Miss wins. I just think they're overall the better team here. Definitely could go either way, though. The fact that it's in Louisiana could be tough. It's a huge rivalry game. I do think Ole Miss wins, though. I think Jackson Dart, Trey Harris has been ridiculous this season. One of the best receivers in the country. I think those two go off for a huge game. I think they go out into that stadium and beat LSU 38-35. Going to be a very good game. One of the games of the week for sure. Clemson goes out on the road against Florida State in a rivalry game. I said this game would be close. I know Florida State has not looked good, but it is a rivalry game. It is on the road. DJU wasn't playing, and honestly, Florida State probably looked a little bit better without him. Florida State now 1-5 on the year after being ranked inside the top 10 to start out the season. Ridiculous stuff from Florida State. 1-5 is just, I mean, they're already almost, on the verge of not making a bowl game. I honestly don't think they do. They have been horrible. Looking at Clemson, though, Cade Klubnik, 235 yards on the day, 2 touchdowns. Phil Maffa ran for 154 yards. They had 265 rushing yards in this Florida State game. Clemson's offense, after the blowout loss against Georgia week 1, where they only put up 3 points, they've responded with 66, 59, 40, and 29. I think Clemson has a very real chance to win the ACC. A lot of people got on the Miami train, but now, the past 2 weeks, Miami's looked pretty bad, if we're being honest with ourselves. Clemson has looked very good, despite the week 1 loss. Clemson very realistically could finish the season 11-1, going into the ACC championship game against Miami, and even if they lose, they'll have a real chance to get in. The schedule is pretty weak though, so that could hurt them in the long run. Now this week against Wake Forest, they're favored by 20. I do think they win. I think Wake Forest covers. It is a conference game on the road, so 20 points may be a little much, but I think Clemson goes out and balls out on offense once again. Cade Klubnik's looking a lot better this season. Number 9, I have Notre Dame, also moving up 3 spots. This little tier of Notre Dame, Clemson, Ole Miss, I think are all kind of in the same area. You could throw LSU in there. I feel like that's a little bit of a tier where teams just kind of teetering on the edge of, are you going to make the playoffs or are you going to miss? I was going to switch up the order, but I figured I'd wait another week just when looking at these games. I mean, Ole Miss is going to play LSU, so whoever wins that will probably move to the top of this. Whoever wins that will move to the top of this tier. So I kept the order the same from last week. So Notre Dame now ranked number 9. They were ranked way up in my rankings after the Week 1 win, and then obviously the Northern Illinois loss pushed them back. But now they've fought their way all the way back up to number 9. Can they continue to stay there is the question, and it's a good question. I think they will. I mean, looking at the schedule, it's a pretty easy schedule. I mean, the only somewhat tough game left on the schedule is at USC, but USC now no longer ranked in the AP poll. So how tough is that game really? I mean, it is pretty tough still on the road. It's a huge rivalry game. Speaking of rivalry games, this week they got Stanford. That is, I do think it's going to be closer than the spread necessarily says. It has Notre Dame favored by 24. Notre Dame typically doesn't blow out teams, so I do think it will be closer than 24. I feel like that's a pretty smash hit if you want to take Stanford to cover. I feel pretty confident in that. But, I mean, Notre Dame, I do think will win, and I feel like they're moving in the right direction. Definitely could finish the season 11-1, and if they do, they'll probably make the playoffs. And that Texas A&M game on the road win looks a whole lot better now than it was looking last week, because Texas A&M could, like I just mentioned, could make their way into the playoffs. As crazy as it may sound, so definitely keep an eye out there. And how Notre Dame continues to play. Moving, though, to number 8, and we got to talk about Miami. Miami had all the eyes on them in the world. Cam Ward was balling out. He was a Heisman favorite through the first couple weeks of the season. I mean, you look at the first 4 weeks, they go out into Florida, a game where many people thought, myself included, thought Florida would win. They blow them out. They continue to roll. But now the first 2 games of ACC play, you start to question what happened. 38-34, they need a missed Hail Mary for Virginia Tech to beat them. Then this week, they need a miraculous comeback. I don't know how they ended up winning. They went 39-38 late at night. I was watching the game. It was a great game. I don't think anybody expected it to be that close, but they do find a way to win. And I guess you could take that as a positive. Good teams find a way to win. I think they get a much-needed bye this week, kind of recoup. But Miami still, I mean, when looking at the schedule, the hardest game left is at Louisville, and it's coming off the bye. I mean, this is one of the easiest schedules we've seen from a top team. Probably the easiest, if we're being honest with ourselves. I mean, what was the hardest game on the schedule? Was it at Florida? Is it at Louisville? I mean, those are the 2 I'm arguing for the hardest game. If those are your hardest games, I mean, there's a real chance where if they lose a game, I mean, if they lose 2 games, they're not getting in. If they lose 1 game, you could argue they might not even get in just because this strength of schedule is just bad. I mean, the Florida State game looked like it would be a really good game, but now not so much with Florida State being 1-4. I do think it's good, though. Miami gets a bye. They get to, settle back down, settle back into ACC play, and I think they do figure it out. But it does look a little tough here in the past 2 weeks. Number 7, Tennessee. We got to talk about this. Moving down 3 spots. I was all aboard the Tennessee hype train. Nico Iamaleava was dealing. The defense was looking like one of the best in the country. You could argue the best. I mean, the most points they allowed through the first 4 weeks was 15 against Oklahoma, who's ranked, and they were also on the road. I mean, the defense was looking legit. NC State was also ranked when they played them. They beat them by 41 points. They go in to Arkansas, a team that I was saying isn't as bad as people thought. Now, I still thought Tennessee would win, but I thought it would be a little bit closer than people were giving Arkansas credit for. But Tennessee goes out and loses 19-14. That's a tough loss. If you're Tennessee, you were expecting, okay, Tennessee realistically, Alabama, Georgia, those are the 2 games you're looking at. You're looking at a 10-2 season at worst. At worst. And in a 10-2 season in the SEC, based off how they've been playing, would get them into the playoffs. This loss does hurt because now, if you lose to Bama and Georgia, you finish the season 9-3, And is that good enough to get you in the playoffs? I'm not so sure. Now they kind of need to beat one of those teams, and the Georgia game's on the road, so that doesn't look great. Now the Bama game is coming up next week. Um, that's going to be a crucial game for playoff seeding because we all know what happened to Alabama. We'll get to this Florida game. I do think they win. I could see Florida sticking around for a little bit. Maybe in the first half it's close, but I do think Tennessee figures it out. I think their defense shuts them down and eliminates any of the trap game atmosphere. I mean, it's at home. I think they should be fine. But that Alabama game is so important for the playoffs picture as of right now. They get it at home, which is huge. I mean, that's such an advantage. They get it at home there. I mean, we saw what they did against Alabama at home when Hendon Hooker was still around. Speaking of Alabama, we got to talk about them as well. These are the two biggest stories of the weekend. This one's probably bigger. Alabama coming off the huge win against Georgia where they dominate in the first half, almost lose but find a way to win 41-34, go on the road to Vanderbilt. And I specifically said this last video. I think Alabama will struggle. I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a lot closer than people think. I think Alabama wins. Vanderbilt goes out and wins 40-35. I thought this would be a low-scoring, sloppy kind of game. Vanderbilt goes out, puts up 40 points on Alabama's head, and now the defense for Alabama is looking a little bit questionable. They have back-to-back weeks where they get 34 put up on them, and then 40 to I mean, you don't want to. It's not what you want to see if you're an Alabama fan. Obviously, you're expecting moving to number one in the AP poll. That's a huge jump. I mean, well deserving. But now they dropped to number 6. They're number 7 in the AP poll. I think it's kind of crazy that Miami's ahead of Bama and Tennessee. But Miami is 6-0, so I guess. But now, when looking at Alabama's schedule, that at Tennessee game, like I said, is crucial. But I mean, their schedule is a whole lot harder than Tennessee, I will say. I mean, they play Georgia. They've already played Georgia, at Tennessee, home versus Missouri, at LSU, at Oklahoma. Those are all ranked teams. Alabama's put themselves in a little bit of a tough position where they have a little bit less wiggle room. They really can't drop more than one game left on their schedule. And like I said, they have 4 ranked games on their schedule, and 3 of them are on the road. So Alabama's put themselves in a little bit of a harder situation than it needed to be. This week against South Carolina, I think they bounce back. I think they win 38-17. I think the defense figures it out kind of and really, this is kind of a get-right game here for Kalen DeBoer and them. But, man, very disappointing loss against Vanderbilt. One of the best upsets, I will say, though, in college football history. I mean, that's point blank. Unranked team being a number 1 team doesn't happen very often. So, special moment there for sure for Vandy. Good for them. But Penn State moving up to number 5. They're in the top 5 of my rankings. They're actually 4th in the AP poll. And people were saying how the SEC, 6 of the top 7. Well, don't look now. The Big Ten has 3 of the top 4 teams in the AP poll. So the Big Ten not going anywhere. The SEC still has 5 of the top 10, but the Big Ten has 3 of the top 4. So, it's interesting. But when looking at Penn State, I thought about moving on to 4, but I really can't. I mean, you look at the schedule. Close game against Bowling Green. They got the win over Illinois, but kind of an ugly win against UCLA. I mean, they really haven't played. They did play Illinois, so I get that's good. But I want to see them play like in Ohio State, and we'll get there. But at USC this week, I think will be a very good test for them. I'm going to be watching this game. I'm going to see how they play now. Like I said, I do think Penn State wins. Low-scoring game. Defense travels. I think Penn State gets it done. But I want to see Penn State, play a really good team. And I think we will see that this game. This is going to be a tough environment against a team that was ranked in the top 10 at one point this year. This next 3-week stretch for Penn State will be a very good test. But when looking at Penn State's schedule, if they win this USC game, at worst it's got to be 11-1. At best, it's 12-0 because they get the Ohio State game at home. But at worst, it's 11-1, and 11-1 probably gets you in the playoffs if we're being honest. So Penn State's in a very good spot here this season just because their schedule's pretty weak. I mean, they got the win over Illinois. They can get a win over USC. They could realistically beat Ohio State at home. I wouldn't be surprised if they go 12 and I mean it's realistic if they do go 12-0. But 1 week at a time. I think they beat USC. Number 4, I do have Georgia. Now people aren't gonna like I have Georgia over Alabama, but I mean when looking at it, Georgia probably should have won if we're being honest with ourselves. Alabama got a 75-yard touchdown to take the lead back. They were also on the road in a night game, and Georgia in the second half looked like the better team. Alabama by far looked like the better first half team. Georgia by far looked like the better second half team. I think Georgia honestly was probably the better team in that game, but Alabama wins. And that's going to be held against Georgia for the rest of the season. This week they got Mississippi State. I don't think they have any problems here. I think they win 42-10. Next week, on the road against Texas, Georgia has a gauntlet schedule this year. They play Bama, Texas, and Ole Miss all on the road, and then Tennessee at home. Those are two fringe top 10 teams. They have 3 of them on the road. It's a brutal schedule here. Now, they don't have to play Texas this week. I think they have no problems with Mississippi State. But that next week game against Texas, another crucial game. This next 2-week stretch of college football is just peak. I mean, really, that's all I can describe it. This next 2-week stretch, this week and next week. Now, we're going to get to the game of the week this week, and it's going to feature Oregon and Ohio State. Oregon's moving up to number 3 in the rankings, moving up 3 spots. Welcome back, Oregon. This is where I had them ranked preseason. They fell all the way outside the top 10. I believe they were as low as 12 or 13 in my rankings. They're all the way back up at 3 now after teams in front of them falling, kind of losing steam. Oregon kind of picking things up after the slow first 2 weeks. That Boise State win doesn't look as bad as it did at the time because Boise State's looking like they have the Heisman on their team, and they're looking like they're going to make the playoffs. And Oregon did win. It's not like they lost. And it's not like Oregon lost any of these games. They won all the games. They just didn't look impressive in doing so. The past 3 weeks, they've blown out all 3 of the teams they've played, and now they have Ohio State coming to town. I will say Oregon's defense looks a lot better than expected. But Boise State did put up 34 on them. I think Ohio State's offense is better than Boise State's. Now, Oregon's put up, besides the first week, put up over 30 points a game. Do I think they can do that against Ohio State's defense? No, I think Ohio State, honestly, probably does have the best defense in the country. And an elite offense, Ohio State has a lot of weapons. Dylan Gabriel hasn't looked too good. I mean, he's not looked bad, but he hasn't looked anything, Heisman level like some people thought. He did throw 2 picks against Michigan State. He's thrown a lot of picks this year already. Alright, I made that up. He's only thrown 3 picks this year. But he has thrown 3 in the past 2 games, so maybe that's where it's coming from. Tez Johnson looks really good. I mean, Jordan James ran for 166 yards. Jordan James is who I think they really need to get going against Ohio State. If he gets going, I mean, he's had his worst game, he had 86 yards. He's had over 100 in 3 games. Against Idaho, he had 95, so basically 4 games over 100. When looking at Ohio State, though, I feel like it is in Oregon, which is a huge advantage. Ohio State was favored by, I think they were favored by 3.5 or 4. It has dropped to 3 as of now, and I wouldn't be surprised if it continues to drop just because Oregon is at home. But with all that being said, I do think Ohio State wins. You can call me biased. I just think as of right now, Ohio State is a little bit better. I do worry Ohio State has not been tested yet. This is their first test, and it's against the number 3 team in the country on the road. So they could start out slow. I wouldn't be surprised if Oregon's winning, 10-0 at some point, maybe winning at halftime. I think Ohio State goes in though. They slow down Oregon's offense. I think the defense really comes through for them. Forces some turnovers, whether it's fumble, whether it's a pick. I think they put the offense in good field position more than once, and I think Will Howard is good enough to capitalize. I think Ohio State wins. I just feel like they have too many playmakers. Now, moving on to Ohio State's side of things, I think we're just gonna skip over the Iowa game. They beat Iowa 35-7. Defense looks great as usual. I will say I predict this game 35-6, so I was 1 point off. But that's besides the point. Ohio State wins 35-7. Now they go on the road to Autzen Stadium, and we already know the score. I think Ohio State wins. Here's the thing: I think the defense, like I said, forces enough turnovers, gives them the offense a good enough field position more than one time. I think the offense is good enough to capitalize this year. I think Will Howard limits the turnovers. Can he have one? Sure. I don't think he has more than one. I think he limits the turnovers. It's going to be a tough environment. Night game against Oregon, never easy. Oregon's a very good team. But I think Ohio State's on a mission this year. They got something to prove. Ryan Day is known to, I don't think he's lost to an unranked team. But he has known to struggle in the big games. I think this could be a scenario kind of similar to the Notre Dame game on the road last year, where I think it comes down to the final drive. Could definitely see that. I think Ohio State starts out a little slow just because they have not played anyone. But I think the better team will end up winning, and I do think the better team is Ohio State. I mean, they just got so many weapons. Oregon's secondary looks kind of suspect. I think the wide receivers can get going. I think the running game can get going. I worry about Oregon's defense in this one, and if it's a low-scoring game, I think it favors Ohio State. These offenses are both elite. I think Ohio State's defense has a clear advantage over Oregon's defense, though. At the lines of scrimmage, Oregon may win, but I think overall Ohio State has the playmakers. They get it done. I think they win 28-24. Definitely could go either way, though. This is another crucial game for the playoffs. This is probably going to determine who gets... whoever wins this game, in my opinion, will probably be number 1 in the country next week. I'll say that right now. Now, it could be short-lived because if Texas goes out the next week and beats Georgia, then they might move back up. Like I said, these next 2 weeks of college football are just absolutely ridiculous. Texas, not only do they have Georgia next week, they have Red River this week. Like I said, I think they win. Coming off the bye, so no previous game recap. I think they win. They move back up to number 1 in the rankings after Alabama loses. I think they win. I think it's closer than the spread says, just because of the rivalry. Oklahoma's defense has looked solid so far. Now, if Quinn Ewers doesn't play, I could actually see Oklahoma winning. I do think he will play, though. Even if Archie Manning does play, they still have a chance. Even if he does play, they'll probably still be favored. I think for good reason. Isaiah Bonds looked very good this season. And the defense has surprisingly looked really good. They've only given up 13 points. That's the most points they've given up this year in a game so far. But yeah, we're going to learn a whole lot about Texas in the next 2 weeks here. Obviously, they have the dominating win against Michigan. That's why they're this high at this point. But that win's looking a little bit worse now with Michigan sitting at, 3-2, 4-2? Only at number 23, I believe, in the rankings. We're going to learn a whole lot about a lot of teams these next 2 weeks. It's a great time to be a college football fan. But that's going to do it for the Week 7 Top 25 rankings. Very interested. Sorry for that, attack I just had. Very interested to see what happens this week and what happens next week, how the rankings change. It's a huge week. Last week was a weak slate. We saw Bama, Tennessee, Michigan, USC, Missouri, all lose. Um, Louisville also lost, but Texas A&M skyrockets up the rankings. Oregon moves up. Penn State moves up. Um, it's it's a great time to be a college football fan. It's only going to get better as the season goes on, so make sure you subscribe. Like I said, we do these videos every single week. Weekly NFL picks as always, and then NBA and college basketball. When those start up, we'll have those videos weekly. We also do MLB. Make sure you go check out the playoff predictions. We're not doing great so far, but give it a look. It's doing pretty good on the channel right now. But that's going to do it. Make sure you subscribe. Links in the description as always. X, Twitch, TikTok, Discord. Make sure you follow those, join those. With all that being said, though, hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys tomorrow with the Week 6 NFL picks.